Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more Total War Warhammer 3 gameplay. This time I'm going to sit down and talk about the Tzeentch roster. By the time that this video comes out, I've already covered the campaign stuff in regards to Tzeentch, but I wanted to dedicate a video just like I did with the other rosters, just to sit down and talk about all the different units, how I found them and so on. These are my personal opinions as I've been able to play for quite some time now. Before anything, of course, this is not a review, just some personal opinions regarding some units as I've been able to use them for a bit, and some people are curious as to what their uses are on the battlefield, especially as there's some stuff that we've already been using from different rosters and different factions. So let's not waste any more time now and jump right in. So let's talk about the Blue Horrors of Tzeentch, your most basic unit and fairly usable for that. It's actually quite surprising. The Blue Horrors themselves are a melee unit, but they've also got a small range weapon. It's fairly short range with range 90, but it's able to do a decent amount of damage before actually getting into the brunt of the battle. Barrier, which is something that all Tzeentch units have, will also make them a fair bit tanky. It's not going to last forever. It does recharge when not in combat though, so you're still able to benefit from it, and you've got flaming attacks, you've got magical attacks, you're able to do quite a bit. In fact, I'd say that I was still using them quite mid-campaign, especially for cheaper armies that I was taking in as support. They are the weakest unit when it comes to your roster, not including Chaos Furies, but you'll definitely get a lot of uses for them. I've seen them more as a meat shield than anything else, because yeah, you have access to Forsaken and so on, but I've been using those for different things, and I've been keeping a front line of Blue Horrors and then supporting them with Pink Horrors. Think of it in a very similar sense to that of Skaven Slaves with slings, but a little tankier and able to do a lot more damage. Moving on swiftly to Forsaken of Tzeentch, this is pretty much the last melee unit that you have. The Pink Horrors kind of fit in a different description. Their high armor and their barrier makes them very, very tanky, but they will obviously break as they are mortals. I've seen them being used a decent amount. I'd say more as a hit and run. They're good for flanks and so on, but even then you've got cavalry for that. They are very durable, and I can keep them in the front line. I wouldn't say that they're entirely useless, but I've seen less use for them, as I've seen a lot more use out of, say, for example, the Blue Horrors, which have been able to fire before the enemy gets there. 90 range is quite good. Though, mind you, if you pin them against, say, for example, other Tzeentchian factions, they're more than able to do some damage. They're also quite good at holding themselves off, as, say, against the Chaos Warriors Accord, and you are going to deal against them quite a few times. It really much depends, but I would say that you can kind of ignore this unit unless you really need them. Especially since after Blue Horrors, you can start going directly to Pink Horrors. Now, Pink Horrors are really, really good. They've got a decent range, 130, a decent amount of shots. They're also alright for melee combat, funny enough. They're squishy because they're Tzeentchian, but they do have access to fairly decent mid-low tier stats when it comes to melee damage. They've also got magical attacks and flaming attacks too, and the barrier does keep them alive. From a distance, they're able to fire decently too. But like I said, early on, if you've got Blue Horrors in the front and then Pink Horrors in the back with supporting fire, which is going to be really quick in your campaigns because you can unlock them really quickly, you're going to get a lot more value than, say, for example, Forsaken, which will take a while to unlock, and, well, you know, horrors are a big thing here. You're going to be able to use them quite a lot, and I see much more of a common horror stack than anything else. And then again, it won't take too long until you can start getting Exalted Pink Horrors, which are better, and that's when I start kind of changing it up, where I put a front line of normal Pink Horrors, and then a line of Exalted in the back. You can also buff them up decently enough, especially when it comes to your Lords and so on. Neither of these have long range. Well, it's decent range, 130 isn't too bad. You can do a lot of damage to your enemies from afar, and if you're planning everything out, if you've got enough troops and so on, you can gun down enemies right before they get to you. Unfortunately, I couldn't show off a certain battle where I'm thinking of, as it's a bit after the embargo limits, but there was a point where I was attacking Sylvania, and yeah, none of the vampires got close to me. They were sending about 4 armies against my Tzeentchian forces, and I was just gunning them down because I had a really high mix of loads of range, and of course, spellcasters peppering them from afar. Your range is powerful, and you have to make sure that you use this, especially with Exalted Pink Horrors. Chaos Knights of Tzeentch are up next, and I know a lot of people aren't too keen on them because, yes, they are a recolor. However, they are very useful for Tzeentch. Keep in mind, 120 armor, armored and shielded. They're fast too. Not very, very fast, but you do have a lot of mobile stuff when it comes to Tzeentch. You can use them to flank and you can do some pretty devastating charges. The fact is that you want different things when it comes to Tzeentch. You're dealing with a lot of very squishy demons. These recolors, while I would have preferred personally if they looked a bit more Tzeentchian, they are still very, very useful. It very much depends on how your campaign is going and how much money you have. I won't say that you'll have them too long, as there are some better options, but I have seen some use of them, especially when dealing, say for example, with hordes of Skaven. Anything that has a high infantry count, like say for example the Cathayans, you're going to need them against, though keep in mind that they do have a lot of armor piercing stuff. And Khorne, well, Khorne has a lot of armor, but they have a lot of infantry, and you're going to want to have something fast to catch up with any juggernauts that you might have to deal with, though they will start to destroy you. The idea is, think ahead and see what your enemy has. Magic, as we know, is very, very powerful, especially in the Warhammer series, but it's not so much a deciding factor when you're dealing with, say, Khorne. You're going to want to be able to deal with anything that he can throw at you and also do some damage, because melee-wise, you're not going to have a good time. And you'll likely replace the Chaos Knights of Tzeentch with the Doom Knights of Tzeentch. Now, these were something that I've been really excited to try out because we never had these on the tabletop. They were mentioned in lore once or twice, but yeah, they never existed. This is a completely new unit. Unfortunately, yeah, again, it's a, recolor. But with that aside, you have a flying unit of knights. Yeah, they're flying, they're very, very fast, they're able to do a lot of damage, they're anti-infantry too. The fact is that I've seen a lot of uses from these, as they're able to zip across the battlefield without too much of a problem. So if you make use of flanking and rear charging, this is probably the best way to go, as it's not like knights where they can get bogged down and so on. This is something that you can fly, get around your enemy, and then charge in no problem, depending obviously if they have range or not, because they will try to pepper you. But I've seen a lot of uses from these. I was very excited. Personally, I love this unit, mainly because it's something completely new. Oh yeah, they can Vanguard too, which is absolutely disgusting, as you can keep them hidden away in different locations, you can keep them landed if you want to, it very much depends. I've preferred them just flying out of the way and then just charging. Vanguard adds in a lot of flexibility to this unit. You won't use them in every army, but I've been using them to maximize damage output in more lore-friendly armies, so a little bit of a mix here and there, some mortals, some demons, just keeping it without going full Doomstack, and they are completely viable for that too. Burning Chariots are another flying entity of yours. You're going to have quite a lot of flyers in this army, and I've noticed them to be really, really powerful. They're decently fast, not as fast as, say, the Doom Knights, but they can still zip around. They can do decent damage in melee because they've got 2 Screamers attached, and not only that, but they are a very, very strong range piece. It's short range, but it does a lot of damage. Think of this as a very highly mobile warp fire thrower. You've only got 1 in your unit, but it does a lot of damage for that. You can easily put it into melee combat afterwards because it's not got a lot of ammunition. It's got 9, but it is a very, very good hybrid unit because it is so versatile. You can have it as a flying chariot, smashing into the enemy ranks or rear. You've got no problem with that. I've normally tried to use its ammo to the best of its ability. Sometimes I've even stopped it from firing, waited until the enemy just bunches up a little bit, do some damage, and then fly them in. Them having Warp Flame is also really good because it makes enemies more vulnerable to flaming attacks, and that's pretty much what your army does. I really like this unit. I like them on the tabletop too, so it's nice. Then again, I must admit that I am living a lot of nostalgia when it comes to the Chaos armies because I played them on the tabletop too. Now we're going to look towards the Chaos Furies of Tzeentch, of course, and this might be the time that I'm being a little negative. Yeah, they're still decent because they've got Vanguard and all that, and they're very fast, but I've pretty much found no uses for them. They've got barrier, but again, that barrier goes down low. You can't have them vanguarding and going out there and doing a lot of damage. Yeah, you can use them for, say, for example, picking out maybe a siege weapon, which is kind of left alone and so on, but even then, I wouldn't waste an army slot for a Chaos Fury. You can get them super early, which will give you some movement, so it's not all that bad. You will probably use it early on, but if it's the case between picking between Blue Horrors or picking between Chaos Furies, I myself have very much preferred Blue Horrors. Just as a disclaimer, it's not like I don't like the Chaos Furies whatsoever, it's more I don't see a lot of use for them in Tzeentch, and they probably have some more uses with the other gods than they would with here. A flying unit is great, but you already have a lot of flying stuff, and they do a lot more damage, so I don't see a lot of points with them with, say, for example, Tzeentch, but I see more of a point with them with, say, SRINIVASAN or Nurgle. Now, the reason why I don't like the Chaos Furies is because we've got Screamers of Tzeentch, and they are just so much better. They're flying, yes, they're not as fast, but they're still able to fly. They've got anti-large, they've got armor-piercing damage too. They are very, very good at just ripping apart stuff. I really, really like the Screamers of Tzeentch. They've got a lot of uses. Taking down large stuff is going to be very helpful, especially since we're playing a game which is implementing a lot of big monsters. And that's also going to help when eventually we start seeing the other factions from Game 1 and Game 2 being brought in with the Mega Map. As, you know, Lizardmen, lots of big monsters, Vampire Counts, lots of big monsters, so on and so forth. You want something like this. Being able to also have some armor-piercing damage is going to help versus, you know, other Chaos factions. Pretty much anything that uses armor, and that's a lot of the factions too. Despite the fact that they're slower than Chaos Furies, they can still move around without too much of an issue. It does help. They are great with flanking. They are great with, say, for example, taking out any stragglers too. I've been using these quite often, and yeah, I can't have any complaints about them. I just love the model too. I mean, look at them. They just look so derpy. Many people who play demons on the tabletop will tell you that Screamers are just so good, and they seem to be here too, so that's great. Chaos Spawn of Nurgle are a bit weird from what I've seen. You see, they're very tanky because they're unbreakable. They're able to do a lot of damage. They won't die. They're very good at anti-armor. They can do a lot of damage, even to just basic hordes and so on. And barrier makes them a lot more useful. The thing is, I've not really seen too much use for them. I've seen those as more aggressive armies where I've been playing more mid-tier aggressive with more defensive focus when it comes to Tzeentch. Let them come to me and I can fire them from afar. That being said, if you're playing more aggressively with Tzeentch, I'm imagining that Chaos Spawn would be very, very useful. I haven't used them too much myself, so I can't really comment. The few times I have used them, they're able to do quite a lot of damage. I just don't see too much of a use. And I don't know, for Khorne it works because it's more aggressive. For, like, Nurgle it works because they're very tanky. For Tzeentch, unless you're playing in a very, very aggressive sense, and even then you've got a lot of other stuff that can do range and then get into combat, I just don't see it. Alright, let's talk about the Lord of Change. This is the monster variant and not the hero. Keep in mind it's still able to cast magic and you can get more spells in the future, and they are with the Lord of Tzeentch. It's a pretty decent lore, it's able to do a lot of damage. I'll have a video in the future dedicated to the Lord of Tzeentch specifically, but as you can see, it's quite big, it's a spellcaster, it's a flyer, it can move out, it's a monster too, it's perhaps not the best monster in terms of physical combat. It can do a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be like a Bloodthirster or, you know, a Great Unclean One. But the fact that it has aggressive spells, it is so highly mobile and it can fly, it makes them very useful. And for the meme in one of my campaigns, which I can't unfortunately show because it's under the turn embargoes, I do have an Exalted Lord of Change and 19 other Lords of Change because, you know, it's just kind of funny to see just 20 gigantic mutant pigeons. I like the fact that they also went with the older model. This is more of an aesthetic thing as, well, it's a nice contrast that you've got the older one for the monsters and then the newer one for the lords. It kind of makes it look a bit more distinguished and it makes the lord feel a bit more special. But other than that, I'd say they're pretty useful. Just don't get them stuck in between something that's anti-large or else it'll die really, really quick. And if you're going to start bringing more than one into the battlefield and so on, start boosting them up, use any Lord skill points and so on to get them a bit stronger, and obviously any tech to just boost them up because it is kind of needed. So next we have the Soul Grinder of Tzeentch, and I've been using these fairly often, mainly because of its really long range, 250. It can pretty much snipe out a lot of stuff. I'd say it kind of works more like a bolt thrower or something, but it's got decent accuracy, and I've been using these to, say, hit Bloodthirsters from really, really far away. Not a lot of ammunition, which is fine because the Soul Grinders themselves are another hybrid unit. They're decently fast, 75 speed, they're able to do a lot of melee damage, so once you're firing, you can wait and then when the enemy get close, just charge right in, or you can move around, stop fire, do whatever you wish. I'd say that they're very useful. They cause terror too, which is great. They're armor piercing, which, you know, is kind of expected from a beast like this. This is one of the very few stuff that you'll have as a sort of an artillery piece. Well, Tzeentch kind of enjoys a few others, but this is the one with the longest range. You're able to do a lot of damage. The Tzeentchian thing is more hit them from afar, get up close, smash them to bits. And you've got that with something like the Soul Grinder. The barrier also makes them super tanky, which, yeah, it's a pretty good unit. I've really, really enjoyed using these. I've kind of liked these more than, say, for example, the Khornate ones. which actually puts it into perspective on how quickly something can change just by dedicating it to a different god. Flamers of Tzeentch. Okay, so these are yet another hybrid, but they're also a pretty good support unit too. So what they are is a ranged flamer unit, as you can imagine by the name, but they also have Warp Flame, which makes enemies vulnerable to flaming attacks, which most of your stuff also has. They don't have a lot of ammunition, but they can do a decent amount of damage, so it kinda levels out, and they're fairly decent at melee too. 90 range is of course quite short, but you can keep them in the front where you would normally put, say for example, blue horrors, and have the pink horrors behind firing. You're pretty much golden. They'll do a lot of damage. I've seen them be pretty useful. When it comes to melee attack, they're also armor piercing, so there's not too much of an issue to put them up front. I've really not seen too many negatives about these. They're really enjoyable to use. You've got to admit they also look absolutely awesome. This is a big thing about it because the older models were not so cool looking, but when you see them moving around in a non-static position, you really get the proper feel of what these are supposed to be. I've been using them fairly often. It's one of these things where mixed armies seem to work out really well for Tzeentch, which is surprising, because if you look at other factions, even from Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, it's always best to kind of stay the same. Sure, you can doomstack and there's no problem with that, but you're going to be fine with mixed armies, and that's a really good thing. Or if you want some higher hitting damage, you can go for the single entity, the Exalted Flamer, which I'm rather curious as to why they never made it a hero, but I'm assuming it's because they wanted to keep things kind of equal between the Chaos Gods. Exalted Flamers can do a lot of damage. You can tell there by the missile strength, it is absolutely devastating. I've been using these, and you can have them as single stacks. I can imagine that you can doomstack these, but I haven't tried it myself. I should at one point though. But the damage output is pretty high. They're decently fast, not too fast. But after they run out of ammunition, you can send them into melee combat and they will devastate. This is a monster. This is a hybrid range and melee monster that can do a lot. Keep in mind, obviously, you can tell by the stats that it's not really good for charging, but it's okay once it's already in the fight. So you're going to have to plan ahead, but what I've normally been doing with these is just kind of flanking behind, getting a few good shots, and I mean really good shots in, and then just throwing it in there. It can do quite a decent amount of damage, and especially if it's supported, you're going to want to support these. You don't want to lose them very early on, because they're quite expensive, and yeah, you don't want to lose a staple unit. Now we can move on to the Lords and Hero choices, and first we're going to look at the Cultists of Tzeentch. Now the reason why this is so unique is because Cultists can summon in demons. We know that they can summon in some big ones, and we've seen it in campaign too. All the Cultists can do that from all the different monogods, but what really sets it apart is that this is also a spellcaster. It's not there to do damage, it's not really there to be up front, but it's got access to the Law of Fire, meaning that Tzeentch has access to 3 different laws. The Law of Tzeentch, the Law of Metal, and now the Law of Fire. The Law of Fire is very, very popular. It still is from, 5 years into the game series that we are so far, and you have access to this here, meaning that if you might not want the Law of Metal, though the Law of Metal itself is quite good, you can switch around. You can also have multiple different spellcasters, so that means that you are hitting your enemies with various different things. Personally, I was really surprised with the Cultists of Tzeentch, because obviously an extra Law of Magic does help, especially if you prefer different styles of play, or you want to hit them with something else. You've got a lot of damage spells, which is really, really good. I'm not really sure as to how useful the buffs themselves would be, especially for a Tzeentchian army, but the damage spells can outweigh that. The only thing is, I don't like the fact that it's only on foot or on horse, as it's not meant to be melee, and I would prefer if it had like a Disc of Tzeentch too, just to kind of give it something extra, though I say that for all the cultists, it would just be nice if they had access to at least a mount or 2 from their demonic roster, because we know that mortals can ride them, and it would just be kind of useful. Them being able to fly, especially as a fire wizard, would be really, really useful. Iridescent Horrors are your other hero choice, and you can get them with either the Law of Metal or the Law of Tzeentch. You can also have mount options, as you can see here, which is the Disc of Tzeentch or the Chariot. Both of them are so useful, mainly because it will make your Iridescent Horror so highly mobile that you can move around and cast spells without too much of an issue, without getting picked off or something, as of course you are a Tzeentchian demon, so you're very, very squishy, and you need to be able to at least get away from harm's way. This is pretty good. The Chariots of the Screamer, at the end of the day, will also make you a melee unit, funny enough, so you can do that. It very much depends if you want to be stronger in melee or if you want to be faster around with flying. but I'd say that these are so useful, you need one in your armies. I've really been enjoying both. It doesn't matter what type of spell lore you're using and so on, though I've been favoring the lore of Tzeentch because it just has a bit more damage output. It just depends on your personal playstyle. It's just one of those things. Heralds of Tzeentch are your generic lore choice, again with the lore of Tzeentch or the lore of metal you can pick, and with the same mount options as the iridescent horror. Very, very useful. There's nothing really to complain. In fact, the lore choices all around have been decent and they fit with the theme very well of their chosen factions. The good thing is that with the mount options you can turn them quite melee focused or just focus on the disc and make them incredibly mobile to move around. Again, it's pretty much up to your playstyle, there's not too much to discuss here. And you can obviously upgrade them, and we'll talk about them in a second, but it's more of the case of what you prefer. Mixing and matching, having different Lord armies with the Lore of Metal and some with the Lore of Tzeentch, that's perfectly fine. You can also mix and match with your hero choices too. So if you have a Lord which is Lore of Metal, then you can have a hero with a Lore of Tzeentch. That means that you pretty much can use all the Lores of Magic at all times. But obviously lastly we have the Exalted Lord of Change, which is upgraded from your Herald, so if you have a Herald of Metal, then this will be a Lord of Change of Metal. They are pretty cool, they're massive, they're large targets, they can fly, they're quick, not as quick as say for example a disc, but they are very, very quick. You can put them in combat too. Yeah, they are weaker in terms of strength, like they won't match up to say a Bloodthirster or a Keeper of Secrets, or maybe even a Great Unclean One, but they're still able to do loads of damage. They've got some powerful spells along with them, they're pretty much boosted up to be some of the best spellcasters in the whole Warhammer Fantasy universe, so you're going to want these. It very much depends on your playstyle. I've got armies where I've got Heralds leading, I've got armies where I've got Exalted Lords of Change leading. It very much depends as to what you prefer, if you prefer speed and all that, though I will say that these being put in the middle of a battlefield, it does look pretty cool, and they're able to do quite a decent amount of damage too. All in all, the Tzeentch roster is varied. It's focusing around one specific section, which is obviously range and magic, but you're able to do damage output and melee without an issue. You've got loads of different types of troops, which will change up your playstyle. I was surprised. I thought that they would be too weak. They are squishy, mind you. Sometimes if you're dealing with factions that you let them get too close, they will do a lot of damage. But being able to pepper the enemy as they get closer, and with so many different range options, I'd say that you're not going to suffer too much when it comes to anything. Well, in the future you might when we have to start fighting elves and so on, because yeah, they're going to have to outrange us and so on. But so far, I'd say that the Tzeentch roster might be the strongest in terms of damage output. Obviously, there's a few contributing factors and so on, and I'll have a video kind of focusing on all 4 Chaos Gods in the future when I'm actually allowed to. But let me know what you guys think about the Tzeentch roster in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.